In the fall of 2015, in a quiet district of Amman, Jordan, a wealthy family became the center of a scandal that escalated into betrayal, murder, and death. Maria, the respected first wife of a prominent businessman, found herself consumed by jealousy after her husband married a second, younger wife. Her jealousy led her to seduce the family doctor. But this affair soon spiraled into a dark and tragic chain of events that shook the entire community. Maria's life had been one of quiet dignity and respect. For over 15 years, she had been the devoted wife of Adam, a man known throughout Amman for his business acumen and success. Together, they had built a life of prestige and status, a life that many envied. Maria was not just Adam's wife. She was a woman of religious devotion and grace, admired by those who knew her. Her calm demeanor and strong faith had carried her through years of marriage, where she had always assumed her place as Adam's confidant and partner. However, the stability she had known for so long began to erode when Adam introduced a younger woman into their lives. When Adam married Sarah, everything changed. Maria had been aware of the possibility that one day her husband might take another wife. It was not uncommon in their culture, but she was unprepared for the emotional impact. Sarah was beautiful, youthful, and full of energy, and it became evident that Adam's affections were quickly shifting toward his new bride. The balance in their household tipped, and no matter how much Adam tried to reassure Maria, the reality was undeniable. Sarah became the center of his attention. Maria felt herself being pushed aside, and the more Adam lavished Sarah with gifts, attention, and affection, the more isolated Maria became. Her evenings were spent alone in a once warm household that now felt cold and distant. Adam no longer sought her advice, no longer shared the details of his business ventures or plans. Instead, he began taking Sarah to events, introducing her to his colleagues and friends, showing her off like a prized possession with every event that Maria watched from the sidelines. The sense of betrayal deepened. It wasn't just jealousy, she felt. It was a deep sense of abandonment. It was during this time that Dr. Ronan entered the picture in a way Maria had never imagined. Dr. Ronan had been a part of the family's life for years. He was the family physician, someone Adam trusted implicitly, and Maria had always respected him for his professionalism and kindness, but as her loneliness grew, she began to notice the attention he gave her. Dr. Ronan was charming, and in those moments when he came to check on her or Sarah, Maria found comfort in the way he looked at her. It was subtle at first, his eyes lingering a little too long, his compliments carrying a weight she hadn't felt in years. What began as harmless admiration soon took a darker turn. Maria's need for validation, for someone to remind her that she was still desirable, began to cloud her judgment. She craved the attention that Adam had once given her. And when Dr. Ronan started visiting more often under the guise of routine checkups, Maria began to welcome his presence. His visits became more personal, and before long their conversations grew intimate. He was there when she needed to vent her frustrations, to talk about the growing resentment she felt toward Sarah and the neglect from Adam. Maria hadn't intended for things to escalate, but in the quiet moments they shared, her vulnerability made her susceptible to Dr. Ronan's advances. He made her feel wanted again, a feeling she had been starved of for so long. What started as secretive glances and touches soon turned into a full-blown affair. The passion she had buried under years of loyalty to Adam was reignited in the most dangerous way. The affair gave her a sense of power, a feeling of control over her life that had been slipping through her fingers since Sarah's arrival. But as the affair deepened, Dr. Ronan's demeanor began to change. What had once been a passionate escape for Maria became something much more controlling on his part. Dr. Ronan was not content with being her secret lover. He wanted more. He wanted Maria for himself completely, and the more time they spent together, the more possessive he became. He started suggesting that their affair couldn't go on forever, that they needed a solution. His eyes, once filled with admiration, now seemed to burn with jealousy and greed. He wanted Adam out of the picture. At first, Maria was horrified by the idea. Dr. Ronan had mentioned it casually during one of their secret meetings. Almost as if he were testing her reaction, Maria dismissed it as absurd, something she could never entertain. After all, Adam was the father of her children, the man she had built a life with for over a decade. But the seed had been planted as her feelings of neglect and resentment toward Adam grew and her jealousy of Sarah intensified. Maria found herself returning to Dr. Ronan's suggestion again and again. Over the weeks that followed, Dr. Ronan's pressure increased. He painted a picture of a new life for them, one where Adam was no longer in the way, where they could be together openly, without fear or secrecy. He played on her emotional turmoil, reminding her of how Adam had cast her aside for a younger woman. How he had humiliated her in front of their family by parading Sarah around. Slowly, Maria's resolve began to weaken. The turning point came one evening in early spring, when Maria watched as Adam and Sarah returned from a family event. Sarah was dressed in a gown that Adam had gifted her, sparkling jewelry adorning her neck and wrists, while Adam smiled proudly at her side. They looked like a perfect couple, and the sight of them together sent Maria spiraling into a deep, dark rage. In that moment, she realized that her place in Adam's life had been reduced to nothing more than a shadow. Her anger, mixed with the feelings of abandonment and betrayal, clouded her judgment. Dr. Ronan seized this opportunity. He continued to press her, promising her that they could have everything they wanted if only Adam were gone. He assured her that it could be done quietly, discreetly, without suspicion. All Maria had to do was agree. The weight of her emotions, the jealousy, the bitterness, the feeling of being cast aside, all came crashing down on her, and in a moment of weakness, Maria agreed. The decision was made and the path forward was set. Maria and Dr. Ronan began planning their affair, no longer just a secret romance, but a dangerous alliance. The once devoted wife, respected by her peers for her grace and piety, was now entangled in a web of deceit and murder. What had started as a desperate attempt to regain control over her life had spiraled into something far more dangerous, something that would change the course of her life forever. As the day of Adam's medical emergency drew closer, the tension in the household was palpable. Maria, who had once carried herself with grace and poise, now walked with a heaviness that seemed to weigh on her every step. Her heart was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, jealousy, guilt and fear all swirled together, leaving her feeling trapped in a situation that seemed impossible to escape. The plan had been crafted carefully by Dr. Ronan, who assured her that everything would go smoothly, that Adam's death would look like a natural tragedy, and that soon they would be free. But the simplicity of the plan belied the chaos that was about to unfold. Ronan had arranged for a routine checkup with Adam under the guise of ensuring his continued health. He had become a trusted figure in the household, always attending to their medical needs with professionalism. No one, not even Adam, suspected that his trusted Dr. harbored deadly intentions. The plan was for Dr. Ronan to administer a fatal dose of poison, something that would mimic a heart attack or stroke. Maria would grieve publicly, as any devoted wife would, while secretly knowing she was free from the marriage that had become her prison. But while Maria and Dr. Ronan prepared for the act, Sarah had grown increasingly suspicious, though she was younger, and less experienced in the ways of marriage. She had a sharp intuition. She had noticed the subtle shifts in Maria's behavior, the way she avoided eye contact with Adam, the coldness that had replaced the once warm relationship between them. More than that, Sarah had seen the way Maria and Dr. Ronan exchanged glances during his visits. They were brief, fleeting moments, but enough to raise Sarah's alarm. She feared that Maria's jealousy of her relationship with Adam had turned into something darker, something dangerous. In the days leading up to the plan to check up, Sarah began watching Maria closely. She was no longer the carefree young bride who reveled in Adam's affections. Instead, she became more vigilant, more cautious. Sarah kept her thoughts to herself, not daring to raise her concerns with Adam, who was blissfully unaware of the tension building in his household. But she feared that something was amiss, something far worse than the simple jealousy between co-wives. And so, on the morning of Adam's appointment with Dr. Ronan, Sarah made a decision. She would follow them, keeping herself hidden in the shadows, to see if her suspicions were justified. As Dr. Ronan arrived at the house that morning, Maria's nerves were frayed. She had been preparing herself for this moment for weeks, but now that it was upon her, the weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her chest. She told herself it was necessary that Adam had abandoned her, humiliated her, and left her with nothing but bitterness. But even as she repeated these thoughts in her mind, they did little to quell the deep unease that gnawed at her. Ronan, however, was calm, methodical. His eyes were cold, his actions deliberate. To him, this was not just an act of passion. It was the fulfillment of a plan he had long envisioned, one that would secure Maria's devotion to him and eliminate the obstacles in their path. Sarah followed closely behind as Dr. Youssef and Maria moved toward Adam's private quarters. She stayed hidden in the hallway, her heart racing as she strained to hear their conversation. What she overheard confirmed her worst fears. She heard them speak of the poison, of how Adam's death would look like a tragic accident. The words were sharp, cutting through Sarah's chest like a knife. She realized that her place in the household, her relationship with Adam, had been the cause of this plot. Maria's jealousy had driven her to the unthinkable, and Dr. Ronan's possessiveness had only fueled the flames in a moment of desperation. Sarah decided to act. She could not let them go through with their plan, could not let Adam die at the hands of his own wife and trusted Dr. She confronted them, her voice shaking with both fear and anger. But Sarah had not anticipated Dr. Ronan's reaction. He had not expected to be discovered, and in his panic, the calm and calculated facade he had worn for so long shattered. What happened next was a blur of chaos and violence. Dr. Ronan, fearing exposure, lunged at Sarah, determined to silence her before she could alert Adam or anyone else. A struggle ensued, and in the heat of the moment, Sarah was overpowered. The sound of her body hitting the floor echoed through the room, and in an instant, her life was gone. Maria stood frozen, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. This was not part of the plan. She had never wanted Sarah dead. Her hatred of the young bride had been intense, but murder had never been her intention. But it was too late now. Sarah lay motionless, her body limp on the floor, and there was no turning back. Maria's world, already spiraling out of control, had now plunged into darkness. Dr. Youssef, his hands still shaking from the act, immediately began to take charge of the situation. He convinced Maria that they had no choice but to cover up Sarah's death, to continue with their original plan to kill Adam. The stakes had been raised, and there was no room for hesitation. If they failed, they would both be caught. And Sarah's murder would be their undoing. Maria, numb with shock and horror, allowed herself to be led by Dr. Ronan. Her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, guilt, fear, and a deep, overwhelming sense of regret. She had never wanted this, but now she was trapped in a web of lies and deceit, with no way out. Adam, still unaware of the danger lurking in his own home, was now more vulnerable than ever. But with Sarah's death, everything had changed. What had once been a calculated plan to free Maria from her loveless marriage had now become a desperate scramble to hide the truth. The authorities would soon be involved, and the perfect crime they had envisioned was falling apart piece by piece. The household, once a place of status and respect, was now a house of secrets. And for Maria, the path she had chosen led her deeper into a darkness from which she could never return. When Cadaly discovered Sarah's lifeless body on that fateful day, his entire world crumbled in an instant. The sight of her motionless, with no sign of life left in her young face, shattered everything he believed he had built. Sarah, his second wife, was supposed to be the symbol of a new chapter in his life, a chapter filled with youth, beauty, and companionship. But now that hope had been stolen from him in the most violent way. Adam, a man known for his strength in both business and family, was suddenly reduced to a shell of his former self. Grief overtook him, and with it came an overwhelming despair that he could not escape. In the days following Sarah's death, Adam retreated from the world. His once commanding presence faded as he withdrew into the confines of his home. The energy and life that had once defined him had been drained, leaving him lost and broken. His relationship with Maria, already strained from years of neglect and division, now felt hollow. Adam couldn't understand how tragedy had struck his family so brutally, and he was unable to reconcile the joy he had once felt with the deep sorrow that now consumed him. The house, once filled with the sounds of life and laughter, became silent, its halls haunted by the weight of grief. In the darkness of his despair, Adam saw no way forward. He blamed himself for Sarah's death, thinking of all the things he could have done differently to protect her. The guilt became unbearable, and in his broken state, Adam made the tragic decision to end his own life. He couldn't live with the pain of losing Sarah, and he couldn't bear the emptiness that had taken over his soul. His death, while devastating, seemed to him like the only escape from the suffering that had enveloped his existence. The news of Adam's death sent shock waves through the community. A man of his stature and influence, a pillar of Amman's society, had taken his own life, leaving behind a family in ruins. The household that had once been a symbol of success and respect now stood as a symbol of loss and devastation. Maria, now the widow of a man she had once loved but ultimately betrayed, found herself playing the role of the grieving wife. She wept openly for Adam, mourning the loss of the man who had been both her protector and, in the end, her victim. But beneath the surface, Maria was consumed by the weight of her actions. She had never anticipated the chain of events that would follow her decision to conspire with Dr. Ronan. Sarah's death had been an accident, a tragedy that she had never wanted, but it had led to Adam's death as well. Now Maria was trapped in a web of lies and deceit. Her once respected status in the community, shattered by the guilt and fear that gnawed at her every waking moment. As the days passed, the authorities began to take a closer look at the events surrounding the deaths of Sarah and Adam. At first, it appeared that Sarah's death had been the result of an accident and Adam's a tragic suicide, but rumors started to spread. Rumors about Maria and Dr. Yusuf, about the affair they had kept hidden for so long. Whispers of jealousy, betrayal and murder filled the streets of Amman, and it wasn't long before the authorities started to piece together a much darker story. On March 6, 2018, investigators discovered traces of poison in Adam's system. The poison had been carefully administered, disguised as part of his routine medical treatment, but it had been enough to raise suspicions. The police began to dig deeper into the family's history, looking into the relationships between Adam, Maria, and Dr. Ronan. It became clear that Sarah's death was no accident, and that Adam's suicide had been triggered by more than just grief. By March 20, 2018, the authorities had gathered enough evidence to arrest both Maria and Dr. Ronan. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails and text messages between the two lovers, financial transactions linking Dr. Ronan to suspicious purchases of poison, and testimonies from neighbors and friends who had noticed the tension building within the household. The web of lies that Maria and Dr. Ronan had spun was unraveling, and there was no escaping the consequences. The trial was set to take place in Amman under the strict scrutiny of the Sharia court. In Jordan, where Islamic law guided the justice system, the severity of Maria's and Dr. Ronan's crimes was met with harsh judgment. The court, filled with spectators, was a place of tension and unease as the details of the affair and murder plot were revealed. Maria, once a respected woman of high status, now stood accused of betraying her husband, conspiring to kill him, and playing a role in Sarah's death. Throughout the trial, the prosecutors painted a dark and twisted picture of Maria and Dr. Ronan's relationship. It became clear that their affair, once driven by passion and revenge, had spiraled into something far more dangerous. Dr. Ronan's possessiveness and Maria's jealousy had led them down a path of destruction, one that had ultimately ended in the deaths of two innocent people. The courtroom was silent as the details of the conspiracy came to light. The poison checkups, the secret meetings and the cold calculation that had driven them to commit such heinous acts. On April 30, 2018, the court reached its verdict. Maria and Dr. Yusuf were found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and the unlawful killing of Sarah and Adam. The Sharia court, known for its strict adherence to justice, sentenced them both to death. It was a punishment that reflected the gravity of their crimes, and for the community of Amman, it was the final chapter in a tragedy that had consumed their lives for months. The downfall of Maria and Dr. Ronan was a sobering reminder of how jealousy and vengeance could consume even the most seemingly pious individuals. Maria's once strong reputation, her grace and devotion had been tarnished by her affair and her willingness to let her emotions drive her to murder. Dr. Ronan, a man once trusted by the family, had become the catalyst for their destruction. The story of their betrayal and the tragic deaths of Sarah and Adam left a lasting scar on the community. A family once held in high regard had been torn apart and the fabric of their lives unraveled in the most irreversible of ways. The events in Amman became a cautionary tale, whispered in the streets, a chilling example of how dark desires and unchecked emotions could lead to the most devastating consequences for Maria and Dr. Ronan. The cost of their actions was their own lives, a price they paid for the destruction they had wrought. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.